Good evening, friends, and welcome to this year's Dare to Understand Awards presented by Interfaith Philadelphia, an organization that was founded in the aftermath of the tragic events of September the 11th with the goal of nurturing dialogue and mutual understanding among the religious communities of Philadelphia, the remarkable diversity of which is a unique trait of our city's distinctive history. Tonight is a very special night for all of us as we begin to slowly emerge from an ordeal of quite literally historic proportions. We gather to reflect upon what we've all been through for the past 15 months, our collective experience of the COVID pandemic through now all of these months. We mark the loss of so many people in our community and indeed throughout the world. This event was planned to recognize the toll that the pandemic has taken on the people of our region from all sectors. We will hear voices tonight from some of these, and we count on you in your own personal reflections this evening to remember those whom we cannot name, but who have been on the front lines of the pandemic, whether they be health professionals, scientists, religious leaders, SEPTA workers, school teachers and aides, restaurant workers, those who work for delivery services, for food markets, for senior care facilities, funeral homes, and countless others whose dedication has kept life going in the face of enormous challenges. The first half of our program tonight will be a time to recognize the loss, sacrifice, and resilience in our region over the last year, and will include an opportunity for you to post the names of friends, colleagues, and loved ones we have lost, as well as a chance for you to honor those who have served during this period in exemplary fashion. In the second half of our program, we will recognize two stellar leaders, physicians who dared to understand and dared to serve, and who continue to provide much needed guidance today. Dr. Stanford and Dr. Anthony Fauci will be presented with Interfaith Philadelphia's 2021 Dare to Understand Award. And as recipients of this award will be presented a framed print entitled Understanding that has been created by Philadelphia artist Krista Bard. This award, which was inaugurated in 2012, honors individuals of distinction who have fostered interfaith understanding and service in our community and beyond. It celebrates those who boldly dare to understand and applauds the courage it takes to cross lines of difference and sometimes misunderstanding in order to work together for the greater and common good. Dr. Stanford and Dr. Fauci join the ranks of the distinguished humanitarians who have received this award in the past and whose names are found printed in the program for tonight's program and on our website. The program tonight was made free and open to the community thanks to the generosity of so many of you who chose to donate to this event and who have invested in our work over the years. We are grateful to all of our sponsors tonight, whose names are listed in the program, with our special gratitude to the John Templeton Foundation and our appreciation for the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania and Maverick Partners Wealth Management. Finally, I'd like to express my own deep personal appreciation, and I'm sure that of many others, for the board and staff of Interfaith Philadelphia, whose dedication and hard work has kept this important work going for the past year, and who collectively have been an inspiration for us all. We will begin our program now with a video sharing stories from just some of our region's frontline workers.
My name is Rex Maimoni, and I'm the Children Youth Development Director at the Cambodian Association of Greater Philadelphia.
My role at PICO is a distribution supervisor in our Bucksmont region.
My name is Eva Whitaker. I work at a cafe in Northwest Philadelphia in Mount Airy.
My name is Joshua Edgar. I work at Penn Presbyterian Medical Center as a trauma chaplain.
Hi, my name is Frances Ann Wilson. I am a teacher at the Chester Arthur Elementary School here in Philadelphia.
Early pandemic, we had to shut down all of our operations. That includes our preschool, our elementary school, and our high school internship experience programs. That was definitely a huge hit for us, because that's really what the majority of our services is, working directly with families. Immediately what we're thinking about is the resources that were essentially being removed from these families that they initially had immediate access to through our organization. So we're talking about internet access, we're talking about access to resources, learning materials, teaching and instruction. This pandemic was making it really difficult for multilingual families. My own identity is grounded in my work, and so when I felt like I couldn't see my students and I couldn't see the families I work with and I couldn't see my staff, it felt like I lost a part of myself.
My role since the pandemic began has greatly changed. I mean, it's pretty surreal, where we are right now. I'm used to every morning meeting with my whole team. We get together in our ready room, have our safety brief, have any type of discussions together. Now that's all changed. Now I have guys remote reporting. We basically communicate through phone calls and text messages, and we've really lost that face-to-face interaction that we would typically have.
One of the largest challenges for me during the pandemic thus far has been working in a cafe, and before that in a bakery, and living with both of my parents, both of whom are over the age of 65. Luckily, neither of whom have health conditions, but it still felt like a large negotiation, kind of constantly trying to make sure that we were all being very safe and taking care of each other, while I would have this large bubble. Not just the people that I worked with, but you're also interacting with the public every day. When I was looking for jobs, when I came back from school, the only places that were hiring were cafes and restaurants, and jobs where I'd be interfacing with the public all the time. And that was a stressor. One of the hardest things that we've dealt with the most probably is the restrictions from family visitation and the isolation of patients. It's kind of everything is heightened, their sense of isolation and loneliness, but also heightened this sense of distance between loved ones and their families who are unable to join them in the hospital. The emotional toll, I think, has been not just global, but also kind of concentrated into frontline workers. I've noticed myself being extra tired when I get home from work, and I'm not even the one doing most of the real hands-on care for COVID patients. One of the biggest things that I think was a surprising toll was the uncertainty of what COVID was and what its effect would be. My wife was pregnant throughout COVID, so we found out we were pregnant in January. We were about to tell people in March, and then the world shut down. And so we kind of had this siloed pregnancy at home, but also I was still going into work multiple times a week and trying to figure out what the implications were for if I had brought something home to my pregnant wife.
I haven't been able to go to work in the school building, so I function a lot online. I kind of like to be in there with the kids. I feed off of their energy. Not having that interaction with the kids has really been hard. My personal life, grieving the loss of my mother due to COVID and her age. Also knowing this is my last year, so today I was acknowledged by the school before an assembly. And that was just, didn't think I'd get so emotional, but I did. And then I realized I can't hug anybody to say goodbye. Couldn't even hug my mother to say goodbye. Yeah, the last things we did, which is part of our faith, part of my faith journey, is to pray every day. And she and I prayed every day that we couldn't be together. And we said the Lord's Prayer and the 23rd Psalm. And we said, I love you. And that was it. So, and I'm glad I got that. I was growing up in the church, and I even got old in the church. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have that. I try to take my lunch at the same time every day so I can make noonday prayers. It's the food I need to keep moving on. And I really value that opportunity to just be still. And I try to carry it into my work. There's some kids who've gone through the same things I have. And if I know and I think it's right time to talk to them, I would do it. Right now, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I have faith that I'll be just as successful in the next phase of my life because of my foundation in faith.
For me, faith is all-encompassing, not just because of the way that I practice or things like that, but because of all that it entails, both in helping me cope and helping me feel refreshed, but also in being very in the front of my face, like, man, this is tragedy. This is real pain and suffering, and where does this fit in to what was a worldview that I held a year and a half ago? Where does this story kind of make its sense in the way that I see the world? And it's not just brought up questions in my heart, but also kind of enlarged my view of the world and my ability to love. It's enlarging my ability to love. It's enlarging my ability to care for others across lines of religious and cultural diversity. And that's been something that's been really important to me through this time.
My brother's a missionary. He's in Turkey now. And I remember in the beginning months, just feeling like that sense of loss and that sense of like, how am I ever going to pull through this? How are we as an organization going to pull through this? And when I had that breakdown moment before that breakthrough, I called him and we prayed, and he said that don't forget like why you pursued education, don't forget why you pursued to work with marginalized populations like immigrants and refugees. He really did reminded me to be regrounded in the faith that I had. So in these small moments of like families being really thankful that they can log into Zoom and know how to like join a meeting, and for students to finally understand how to use the Google Classroom to complete their homework assignments, and in the midst of reconnecting with families, in the midst of helping families get resources, in the midst of helping our students get reconnected with their teachers, really brought a sense of empowerment back into myself and also in the work that we do at CAGP.
I have an enormous faith in community. Even though I work in a cafe, I think that the ways in which I support people meeting their needs, whether that's for caffeine or for having a space outside of the house, any of those things, I'm providing service to people and providing space for people to find a sense of maybe not normalcy, but ritual and routine. I think that we crave those things, especially during this time where everything feels chaotic and disjunct. A huge source of hope for me this year has been this social recognition of our responsibility to each other. And that's been huge. And I see that in the work that I do every day. The ways in which we care for each other, through actions, through words, affirmations, acts of service, small or big.
The hope was getting vaccinated. I went to the Black Doctors COVID Consortium. The first one, closer I got to the door, there was more and more hope. And then that first shot was the exhale. And then counting the days until the second one, and the hope grew more and more and more. And that second shot, and those 2 weeks later, Thanks be to God.
One bright spot personally has been witnessing the good in humanity that actually was willing to lay their lives down for people that they've never even met before. To me, that was inspiring, and it just brought out some of the real good that's present in people, particularly frontline workers who have decided to give their lives in service of others, who don't seek recognition. Many times when you ask people or say thank you for doing this, the nurses and all, they kind of shrug it off. Oh, it's nothing, or this is my job. And there's multiple times when we got donations and people were called healthcare heroes and things, and someone pulled me aside and said, Josh, I'm really struggling with being called a hero. Like, I'm not a hero. I'm not. And I realize that people are perceiving me that way, but I'm just really trying to do my best to help others. And I said, well, that's quite heroic.
Such powerful stories from so many people, and there are so many more such stories in our community. Thankfully, though, we are finally, though still slowly, beginning to emerge from the long seclusion into which we were all so suddenly plunged by COVID. And as we begin to gather once again in person with friends and loved ones, we will do so with, I'm sure, a broad range of emotions, with joy and exhilaration, and just plain relief, to be sure, but also with sadness and grief at the absence of those who are no longer with us, those who over the past year succumbed not only to COVID, but to other diseases, and did so oftentimes completely alone, by themselves, and whose deaths were mourned by each of us individually, without the supporting presence of the communities of which we are all part, and whose presence at such time is so important to our own well-being. This past week, for the first time in over a year, I set foot in a church. In fact, the church where I had served as a pastor for many years until my retirement. I went to visit the church's columbarium, to visit the resting place of two dear friends who died within days of each other just over a year ago in the very earliest weeks of the pandemic. My friends George and Mary Schneider. I've lost other friends and acquaintances to COVID since, but none who were as close to me as were George and Mary. And not to have been able to mark their death by gathering with others in the church of which they were such faithful members was for me a terrible blow. I'm sure that many of you, perhaps even most of you, have your own George and Marys, have experienced the loss of people who were near and dear to you, whether those were loved ones, longtime friends, or colleagues. The loss of whom has left an emptiness in your heart, indeed in your life, an emptiness that was never assuaged by the ritual gathering of community, by the offering of prayers and songs of faith, by the sharing of memories, and not least, by the shedding of tears, the tears that were shed together. And so we begin tonight with an opportunity to mourn those we have lost, an opportunity for you to mark the loss of those whom you knew and loved. We will light 3 candles. The first we light for those we have lost. We have now opened a Padlet to share the names of those we have lost and whose memory you would like to honor tonight. The link to this Padlet has just been posted in the YouTube chat box, though you may need to exit the full screen view in order to see the chat box. When you click on that link, you can add any names and photos you might have of those whom you have lost throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as read the many names that have been posted by others. And when you're ready, please return to this live stream.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Good evening all. In the sacred text that Muslims use, the Quran, the idea of sacrifice is featured prominently in various places. There are various words used to discuss sacrifice in the Quran. Some speak to an actual physical sacrifice, as in the offering up of an animal to God, and some speak about making the choice to make a more deliberate and sometimes difficult path with the hopes of gaining the pleasure of the Most High. It is a way to draw nearer to the Almighty. Some examples from the text suggest they give food, or state they give food despite their love for it, to the poor and the orphans and the captives. We have appointed a rite of sacrifice for every nation so that they may invoke God's name over the livestock He has given them. Your God is one God, so submit to Him. Therefore, in Islamic terminology, sacrifice means something which draws one closer to God in a spiritual way. In sacrificing an animal, we are performing this ritual to draw us closer to God. In sacrificing something you love for the betterment of others, part of drawing closer to God by following the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and other prophets and messengers whom God has sent. Many times, when we think of sacrifice, we think about what we lose or the idea of loss. Reverend Jesse Gardner spoke eloquently about loss and how our communities and him personally are navigating these various losses. A great part of sacrifice, I am discussing it here, is about improvement, about gain, about increase and benefit. Its core from this perspective are choices. Embedded in this understanding of sacrifice is service. It is this service, it is this sacrifice through service that we are acknowledging and lifting up. Many individuals, those who serve and support others, have made choices over and over again to serve with honor, dignity, empathy, and compassion during this past year. Our frontline workers have made and continue to make choices to serve individuals and communities. We are approximately 2 months away from a major Muslim holiday for Muslims, Eid al-Adha, or the Feast of the Sacrifice. Eid al-Adha is about the Prophet Ibrahim or Abraham and his sacrifice. The Prophet Abraham's story of sacrifice centers on him being and then God rewarding this willingness to sacrifice by sending the provision of an animal to be sacrificed. So in this story, sacrifice that could have focused on loss resulted in increase. It resulted in an increase of sustenance, an increase of honor, and an increase in their legacy. Even in our normative traditions, we use the term Abrahamic traditions or the Abrahamic faith. The sacrifice of the Prophet Abraham and his son led to their elevation. Our sacrifice leads to elevation. Your sacrifice leads to elevation. A more contemporary example of this elevation is in the instance in New York where residents clap for the frontline workers around 7 p.m. each day. This is the elevation for their sacrifice. I want to distinguish this type of sacrifice from the one that emerges from toxic positivity. Sometimes we may hear, well, I guess that is a sacrifice you had to make. Or, look on the brighter side. This type of sacrifice is one that may have been made without conscious choice. This is a sacrifice made when you are deprived of your agency. Sacrifice without agency is not laudable, as we need to tap into a different part of our character to navigate that type of loss. Interfaith Philadelphia is holding space for those who experience loss without agency. And we are also holding space for those who have chosen to sacrifice in order for others to feel whole. It is the agency in sacrifices made to move families, businesses, communities, and strangers through this year of change that Interfaith Philadelphia is also acknowledging in this moment. I want to close off by returning to the story of Ibrahim, peace be upon him. The characteristics embodied in sacrifice include humility, compassion, empathy, a willingness to delay gratification, and the willingness to see others elevated even before we see ourselves elevated. To those who have sacrificed with agency, we say thank you. May your effort bear more fruit in addition to what has already been born from your work. May your agency instill within you the vision to continue using that agency to transform and change the society around you. May your sacrifice serve as a reminder to the rest of us about the type of resilience that emerges when we choose to sacrifice. Amen or amen. To our honorees, Dr. Stanford and Dr. Fauci, thank you for your sacrifice. At this time, if it is part of your personal or faith tradition, you're invited to light your second candle as you reflect on those who have sacrificed. We want to invite each of you joining us tonight to share in this reflection of those who have sacrificed. We have opened the Padlet to share the names of those whose selfless service and sacrifice you wish to honor. We have just posted the link to this Padlet in the YouTube chat. Please click on that link to add any names and photos you might have of those who have sacrificed throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and to read the names posted by others. Please return to this live stream when you are ready.
Holding the loss, honoring the sacrifice, we now turn to resilience. Like many of you, I turned to my faith and faith community for grounding during the pandemic. I longed for wisdom and practices from my Jewish heritage that would meet me, offer comfort, and carry me forward. Inevitably, they were there, and most frequently in places they had always been. They were in the morning blessings of gratitude for being alive and healthy, in the prayer for healing, in the prophetic cries for justice, in the prayers for peace. My community offered a place to say Kaddish, our mourner's prayer for two relatives lost early on to COVID. But above all, it was the rhythm of Jewish time that sustained me, the weekly gift of unplugging for Shabbat, feeling bathed in the melodies of Hebrew prayers that even on Zoom could lift my spirits, and the rhythm of holy days laden with practices, ritual, and wisdom that offered meaning and hope when the world felt so fragile and fractious. In the course of this past year, we all found sources of strength and witnessed them in those around us. Resilience came from gratitude for the small and great blessings in our lives. There was morning coffee, an exquisite spring day, laughter, comfort foods, and the comfort of our COVID wardrobe. And there were blessings of children, good health, having a job, good friends, and beloved pets. Some discovered new hobbies, pulled out old family recipes, found books they always wanted to read, or sunk into a good Netflix series, or many. For others, resilience came from long-standing practices, meditation, prayer, journaling, and favorite forms of exercise. For many, resilience came from having a place to turn on a hard day where we could safely share our fears, our helplessness, our rage, our despair. Whatever it was that helped us face the loss, find the strength to persevere under challenging, endless, or even dire circumstances contributed to our resilience. At Interfaith Philadelphia, we witnessed the resilience of countless faith communities, adapting their worship and study, holidays, weddings, and funerals in ways they never imagined. We heard stories of how poignant moments in tenuous times revealed what is most essential. We watched selfless faith leaders offer spiritual nourishment, accompaniment, community, and hope. Many told us they understood in new ways what life is like for congregants, where homebound is not a temporary situation. And I can't reflect on resilience without expressing gratitude to Interfaith Philadelphia's nimble and strong board and staff. At the beginning of the pandemic, we paused to survey our constituents to see how we could help and to discern what of our work was most essential. And then day in and day out, our team created dynamic virtual offerings. We equipped people to better understand their colleagues, students, and neighbors, and with skills to bridge divides, and yes, to have difficult conversations. With partners, we offered sacred presence through countless community listening sessions and vigils. Youth and adults who joined our online immersion programs repeatedly told us they valued the chance to learn, to grow, and to meet new people, especially at a time when they felt socially isolated. Interpersonally, our dedicated staff team cared for one another, checked in on one another, and found ways to deepen our connections, all while working and programming remotely. Thank you. In the powerful words of poet Amanda Gorman, let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried. Let us pause now to honor our resilience. Think for a moment about what you did to care for yourself and your spirit. Recall the person or persons who gave you strength this past year. Think about the small things for which you found gratitude. Let's light our third candle for resilience. In a moment, we'll pay tribute to our exceptional honorees, Dr. Ayla Stanford and Dr. Anthony Fauci. Now we turn to Rabbi David Strauss to close out this part of our program with words of blessing.
May the one who blessed our ancestors bless all those who put themselves at risk for the care of the sick. Physicians and nurses and orderlies, technicians and home health aides, EMTs and pharmacists, all those who navigate the unfolding dangers of the world each and every day, to tend to those they have sworn to help. Bless them in their coming home and bless them in their going out. Ease their fear and sustain them. Source of all breath, healer of all beings, protect them and restore their hope. Strengthen them that they may bring strength. Keep them in health that they may bring healing. Help them know again a time when they can breathe without fear. Bless the sacred work of their hands. May this plague pass from among us speedily and in our days. And let us say, Amen.
Good evening. I want to say to our honorees on tonight and to thank you all for this opportunity to be together. It's such a privilege to have this opportunity to introduce Dr. Alice Stafford tonight, the founder of the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium. Dr. Stafford is being honored because she dared to step up, to stand tall, and to stand with her community. When COVID-19 began spreading throughout the city, Dr. Stafford stepped up, leading like those ancestors that have gone before her. When racial data for COVID-19 was indicated that the underserved communities would not be served in the same way in which the other communities would be served, she sacrificed herself, her funds, and stepped forward. Dr. Stafford understood what Black people were going to be, that Black people were going to be disproportionately affected because they are often underserved. There was no time to wait. Using her own funds, she rented a van, filled it with testing supplies, and began hosting an event testing events in the community centers and churches in and around Philadelphia. As Dr. King would say, Dr. Stafford took the first step of faith, even when she didn't see the whole staircase. Dr. Stafford has offered consistent and steadfast leadership through this healthcare crisis. She has organized and led groups of volunteers to administer COVID tests. To date, 25,000 tests have been administered in 3 months. And I would like to report that as of to date, 47,000 vaccinations in 4 months. I thought it was very important to name those numbers on tonight for her community. Dr. Stafford's efforts, passion, and commitment demonstrate her level of dedication, shepherding ways in which healthcare providers can think outside of the box to create just, fair, and equitable care for all people. Dr. Stafford, a wife, a mother, a compassionate healer of many, you have motivated and inspired me by standing up and being intentional. Thank you for your labor, your sacrifice, your resilience, and your commitment to seeking justice in an imperfect world, for you have been and will be welcomed into a beloved community. In this sacred moment, we invite you to lift up your award that you have been presented tonight on behalf of Interfaith Philadelphia, because we want to give you that moment for it to be seen on the screen so that all that can see that what you dare to do, what you sacrificed to do, you deserve this Dare to Understand award tonight. Congratulations. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Reverend White, and thank you all for acknowledging our work. You probably may not know this, but on April 16th, 2020, we started this journey in a church with a prayer and faith. At the time, I had about 20 testing kits and enough PPE for maybe 2 days. But I knew I had to do something. And it was faith that let me know that every need would be filled. And we were able to get more testing kits. And before my account was depleted, the CARES Act was passed. And more people came to help. And we earned the trust of the community. And now, even when you say those numbers, it's surreal. But I believe to whom much is given, much is required. And also that God honors excellence and excellence honors God. And so we are just getting started. We have become a known entity in the community and we are not leaving. And we want to continue to strive for equity and advocacy with empathy, providing access to those who don't typically have it and coming to the people. I didn't realize it until just this day that every time we went into a church where we were testing or where we were vaccinating, I was refueled. The pastors, people cleaning the bathroom, cooking us meals, handling security, they always prayed with me. They always said they had been praying for me, and I felt that love. And so I'm grateful to Interfaith Philadelphia for acknowledging me. I love this city more than you know, and thank you for taking the time to share this Dare to Understand award with me. Thank you so much, and bless you.
I am delighted to introduce to the Interfaith Philadelphia community my good friend, Dr. Tony Fauci. The challenge for me or anybody assigned such a large task is this. What is there to say that you don't already know about a national guru and teacher whose friendly daily advice and guidance through this pandemic have made him an essential member of our individual families? Who would have imagined that a distinguished scientist could have provoked the kind of adulation afforded only to super athletes and movie stars? His scientific accomplishments, awards, and honorary degrees are the stuff of legend. But more currently impactful are the important iconic designations, such as membership in the Bobblehead Hall of Fame, a New Yorker Roz Chast cartoon, the Fauci t-shirt. Oops. Sorry about this. An invention called the Fauci effect, namely the large increase in the number of young people inspired to apply to medical school, and the mock video of last year's Kentucky Derby featuring a horse named Fauci. Sadly, he didn't win. What is it about Dr. Fauci that has elevated him from the thousands of other dedicated scientists worldwide who have so ably contributed to the ongoing collective enterprise fighting the pandemic? Maybe it's his comforting, clear, down-to-earth Brooklynese style of communication. Maybe it's his remarkable willingness and courage to say yes to all invitations, even at the risk of public overexposure and backlash from those in our country who, in defiance of common sense, promote misinformation, mistrust, and disrespect for recognized expertise. To me, Dr. Fauci's standout appeal can be summed up in one word: character. Perhaps an early indicator was his decision to major in classics, along with the required pre-medical courses at Holy Cross College, where he became firmly grounded in Jesuit moral philosophy and the principle of rigorous intellectual inquiry. These values have remained deeply embedded and intertwined with his remarkable work ethic, his profound respect for organizational teamwork at his home base at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, and his drive to serve, as demonstrated by his soul-searching experiences with the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s, and as the architect of President George W. Bush's emergency plan for global AIDS relief. Further, he has shown throughout his career a humble awareness that science knowledge, even with its robust, centuries-old, brick-by-brick foundation, is always provisional, always subject to change, as evidence and data accumulate to alter the perceived certainty and dogma of the moment. Thus, one of Dr. Fauci's favorite observations is, if I'd only known back then what I know now, I would have been so much smarter. During my more than 50 years of friendship with Dr. Fauci, dating back to our intense 2 years together as medical residents, I have known his uncompromising integrity, his hardwired humanistic love of people, his empathic and heartfelt devotion to patients who benefit from his healing persona, his uncanny ability to balance love of work with love of family, and his faith in knowing that we all have the obligation to do what's right in service to the good of society. In Albert Camus' 1947 novel, The Plague, the main character, Dr. Bernard Rieu, works tirelessly to lessen the suffering of those afflicted by a lethal outbreak of bubonic plague, a bacterial infection. But he doesn't consider himself a hero. This whole thing is not about heroism, Dr. Rieu says. It may seem a ridiculous idea, but the only way to fight the plague is with decency. Another character in the novel asks him, "What is decency?" The doctor replies, "Doing my job." Like Dr. Rieu and Dr. Stanford, Dr. Fauci is always reliably doing his job. He embodies the essence of Interfaith Philadelphia's mantra, "Dare to Understand." And he has dared us all to understand and to share his own unswerving faith in the power of scientific discovery, which even with its zigs and zags will lead to a positive and hopeful future. Therefore, on behalf of Interfaith Philadelphia, it gives me great personal pleasure to present the well-deserved Dare to Understand Award for 2021 to Dr. Anthony Stephen Fauci.
Thank you very much, Howard. Here's the award.
Looks good.
Well, thank you so much, Howard. It's such a thrill to be here with you today and such an honor to receive this award together with what I just saw Dr. Alice Stanford for the extraordinary work that she and her colleagues have done. And it's also especially meaningful to me to be presented this award by my dear friend Howard Hertig. I was just reflecting as Howard was making this presentation that it was 55 years and 1 month ago that we first met as interns at the New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center. It seems like those days were just such a short time ago when we were on the wards together, learning medicine with each other and from each other. So this is very special for me to receive this award from you. Thank you so much. This COVID-19 experience that we all have had over the last 15 months was something that often people in my years as an infectious disease physician and director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases would ask me, what is my worst nightmare as an infectious disease person? And I would respond with a consistent response that it was the sudden evolution of a new virus, likely jumping from an animal host species to the human, that has two major characteristics: a very high degree of efficiency in transmitting from person to person, and the potential for a high degree of morbidity and mortality. And unfortunately for us, we in this country and throughout the world are living through what was my worst nightmare, the worst pandemic that this planet has experienced in the last 102 years. I have had the opportunity, as some of you and maybe many of you know, of being in a situation first over the last year and a half during the Trump administration, and then now for the last 4 or 5 months during the new administration, to be in the position of advising the administration about how one should approach this outbreak. The one thing that has pained me the most, and I hope that this pandemic might shed a light on it and realize how non-productive it is the extraordinary divisiveness which we have in our society when, as we're trying to struggle through a historic pandemic, it seems that we are fighting with each other instead of fighting the common enemy, namely the virus. That is an observation that I have made and lived through that is really, truly discomforting, in fact, outright painful. Fortunately for us in the United States, we have now vaccines that will be the solution to this terrible outbreak that we are experiencing. And we will get to the end of this, and we will get to the end of this together. But I hope that the outbreak will not allow us to forget the inequities that there are in our society, as we've seen people of color, because of not only the jobs that they have that put them in higher degree of likelihood of being infected, but the determinants, the social determinants of health, which have put them in a position that when they do get infected, they have a higher degree of likelihood of a severe outcome leading to hospitalizations and death. So when this is all over, I hope we don't forget that as a society, we do have a responsibility to try and right those disparities, those social injustices, and those social determinants of health that have led to that. And in addition, I just want to take this opportunity to tell this audience that as a nation, as a rich nation, I feel that we do have a moral responsibility to make sure that the rest of the world of low and middle income countries that don't have the opportunity and the resources to be able to be vaccinated the way we have this opportunity now in this country, that the United States take a leadership role together with the other wealthy countries to make sure that the rest of the world receives the benefit of life-saving vaccines similar to we in this country are having that benefit. So once again, thank you so much for this award. It means a lot to me. And I want to tell you how important it is to me to be here with you with this extraordinary organization. And I have my passport to understanding, and I will keep it with me because I just read what they invite me to do, and I will do that. Be curious, venture out, welcome in, stand tall, and stand with. So thank you for reminding me of these 5 important principles. Thank you again.
For more than a year, many of us have stayed at home in order to be safe. But some continue to work outside of their homes, including many school district employees, proving just how essential they are to making sure our students had access to food and resources to learn from home. I thank them for going above and beyond to support others.
On behalf of my diocese, our profound gratitude for your clarity, intelligence, perseverance, and your deep concern for all Americans. Well done, faithful servants. It is a new day. You are in our prayers, and may God bless you.
Appreciating all the medical professionals, the first responders, and all of the people, and wishing blessings for prosperity, health, and goodness moving forward.
On behalf of the John Templeton Foundation, I want to extend my congratulations to Dr. Ayla Stanford and Dr. Anthony Fauci for receiving the 2021 Dare to Understand Award. Dr. Stanford, thank you for recognizing a need and for developing an innovative and practical way to increase access to the vaccine. Dr. Fauci, thank you for being a voice of reason and clarity throughout the pandemic. Both of you have made significant contributions, and we are extremely grateful for all that you have done. Congratulations.
On behalf of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, I thank Dr. Fauci and Dr. Stanford for their care, their passion in keeping us safe. Thank you so much.
On behalf of Penn Medicine, we cannot say it enough. Thank you, healthcare heroes, for your tireless efforts, your unwavering compassion, and your commitment to your patients.
Hi, I'm Mayor Jim Kenney, and I want to say thank you to our public safety employees, streets and sanitation workers, first responders, Department of Health employees, and the team at the Parks and Recreation Department for keeping our outdoor spaces available for use. Thank you to Dr. Stanford and the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium, who continue to fight for and ensure equitable access to COVID testing information and vaccines. Thank you to Dr. Fauci for guiding us through this period of loss. Our community has changed over this past year and shown its strength. We mourn the lives of those lost, and we are thankful for all who put their lives on the line to keep Philadelphia moving. God bless you all.
Good evening. Before I offer some words that can send us forth from this wonderful gathering, I want to say a few things directly to Dr. Fauci, Dr. Stanford, and all of those who have committed their time and their energy and their labor to keeping us alive and keeping us well. I know that there are probably things you feel you can't say aloud. You can't say that tears have been your food on many days and many nights. You can't admit that you sometimes survive off moonlight alone. You can't disclose that sometimes the burden, the responsibility, the calling, the work is debilitating. You cannot confess to being afraid that people won't listen, afraid that what you're doing and saying won't make a difference. You can't ask who will help the healers find healing. There's so much that goes unsaid, perhaps because you've poured your words into your doing. You're the ones who run toward the danger. You're the ones who make friends with death and sickness and chaos. You're the ones who diagnose the pain, treat the wounds, answer the hard questions. And you do it, I know you do it, sometimes at the expense of your own pain, your own wounds, your own hard questions. And yet you rise to every occasion. You say yes and yes and yes again and again and again. You show up for other people's spouses, other people's children, other people's friends and families and loved ones. And you can't reveal that so often that takes you away from your own. You can't be vulnerable about the tensions that exist between your duty to yourself and your duty to others. There's something peculiar about this spotlight. With this spotlight comes a kind of spectacle. With responsibility comes loneliness. With expertise comes pressure. Visibility can feel like abandonment. Leadership is its own kind of wilderness. Being seen everywhere is not the same as being known. In her extraordinary novel, Parable of the Sower, Octavia Butler wrote, "There is no end to what a living world will demand of you." That's true. I know that you have sometimes put your lives, your rest, your joy on hold for the good of the world, for the good of this nation, for the good of this city. We cannot even calculate your sacrifice. We do not even know the extent of your surrender to a calling that is beyond you and bigger than you, a calling to work that you feel obligated to do. You've given so much for a world that often mocks and ignores and abuses our healers, even when what the world needs the most is healing. So this is my prayer of blessing to you, Dr. Stanford, Dr. Fauci, and all of you frontline workers, essential workers. I pray that you will consistently find a refuge for your truths, a place, a person, a time that will give you the permission to say the things that you haven't said but need to say, a soft place to land after the frenzy of your long days and long nights. I pray for you the blessing of being seen and known. I pray that you are cared for, that you are loved well. I pray for you the peace that passes all understanding. I pray for you joy unspeakable. I pray that you will find a balm for your grief and repair for the places that are crumbling in your heart. I pray that your life will be in an age where so much that was once private is now available for all to consume. I pray that you find rest, sweet rest for your mind, your body, and your spirit. I pray that you have room to lie down. I pray that your breath comes easy during an age where viruses and other pandemics threaten to rob us of our very breath. I pray that every day you are able to actually bless your own self, that you're able to touch your own body, this instrument you use to dispense healing, and speak tenderly to yourself, to your body. That you might say to yourself, in these hands, great blessing. From these hands, great healing all around, all around, all around these hands, peace. In these hands, a song by Kate Munger. I pray that with every day you know that you are loved and that we are grateful and that you have already been such a great blessing to the world. And now to everyone. In her novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, author Zora Neale Hurston wrote, there are years that ask questions and years that answer. 2020 was a year that posed questions we were too afraid to ask before. 2020 was a year that gave us some answers that we have before refused to accept. And 2021 is unfolding similarly. This year and last year have shown us that the mythologies that we have so carefully crafted and preserved are just that, myths. Our ways of being and doing are collapsing in on themselves and are quite literally killing us. In the words of Audre Lorde, we are being forced to look upon ourselves and our living with a harsh and urgent clarity, a clarity that will leave us shaken but stronger. As I think about all of the grief and loss and death of the past 15, 16, 17 months, I'm thinking about the cultural tradition known as the wake. I grew up in a religious tradition where funeral homes would host wakes, these services that happened before the funeral. At the wake, people would bring the raw and visceral parts of their grief to the space. The family and friends of the deceased would clasp hands and rock and moan and groan and weep and rage and shout. At the wake, people were inside their bodies, in touch with their feelings of despair and desperation. And those feelings were in tension with the joy and the hope that they also felt. They knew that death would not have the last word. They knew that the dead would somehow still remain with us, still protect us, still journey with us. And they knew that eventually God would wipe their tears away and trouble wouldn't last always. And somehow, some way, they would go on just a little while longer. Wakes were where people were made whole and healed. Now, this didn't happen just by happenstance or coincidence. Wakes were actually work. The bereaved had to be willing to strip away all the pretense and take a long look at what was real, the coffin in front of them, the reality of death. COVID-19 and our other viruses, social and political viruses, continue to leave rows and rows of coffins in their wake. So perhaps this is the time for our collective wake work. Time for us to look at the real thing in front of us and behind us, the historic and contemporary situations of death and evil and suffering. There won't be any transformation without the wake and without wake work. Wake work is the struggle to accept the reality of pain, of anguish, of endings of death. Wake work is accepting the notion that we can't make suffering obsolete with a broom or a mop or a breath mint. Wake work is letting go, allowing the process of deconstruction and revision to proceed, even if we're afraid of it. And so we must let selfishness and pretense and denial and contempt and hand-wringing and cynicism go. We must let the grief we feel now be the grief that signals a break from the status quo, the train wreck that has become our society. And our faith communities, we have a role to play. We can host the wake. We can make room for the death of a system. Perhaps the coffins that are produced by COVID, by violence, by greed, by poverty, by white supremacy, like the wreckage of a sinking ship, can become our rafts. My mentor and friend, Reverend Lanice Pinkard, says this: perhaps this, COVID-19, is a crisis that is too good to waste. And I agree. At the end of every wake, there is hope. Death doesn't have the last word. Suffering is not a foregone conclusion. None of the challenges we face, none of what interrupts our ability to be free and full are inevitable. None of this is inevitable. And that is what gives me hope. It's a grief-stricken hope. It's a hope that's sometimes full of dread, but it is a sliver of hope. The worst things we face are not the last things we face. This is not the last. Life is possible. So I ask this question, taken from the opening line of a novel, The Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara. Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well? Just so you're sure, sweetheart, and ready to be healed, because wholeness is no trifling matter. A lot of weight when you're well. We have survived death. Will we have the courage to deal with what has been making us sick? Will we have the courage to pay the cost to do the work of being healed and whole? I think we do. And I think we will. May this be so. Thank you all.